I'm Chance Dorland, and this is In-Depth, an interview program from expressnews.com where you can find in-depth reporting and other resources concerning every topic you'll hear discussed on the podcast. Fiesta is in full swing here in San Antonio at the time of this recording, and to discuss the history of the celebration, its importance to San Antonio, and how best to safeguard Fiesta to ensure its longevity, as well as a bunch of other stuff, I'm guessing. I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News reporters John MacCormack and Elaine Ayala. So first off, great to have you guys both here.
Well, hello. Happy Fiesta. Viva.
Happy Fiesta. And John, you are our first guest who's been on the show 2 weeks in a row, so that's a record.
Nice to be here.
Excellent to have you back. So first off, I think this is going to be fun. So everybody let it loose.
Let's have some fun.
But for the uninitiated, this is my first Fiesta. What is Fiesta? How would you explain this to someone who perhaps doesn't know or just knows a little bit?
Yeah, Fiesta started as a historic tribute to the defenders and heroes of the Alamo, but has expanded far beyond to today's 110 events under one label, Fiesta San Antonio. So it is like so many huge festivals throughout the country, like the Mardi Gras, that just kind of goes on for days, and there are official events and unofficial events and lots of turkey legs and lots of beer.
Yeah, and I would say emphasis on events.
Absolutely.
I'm from the Midwest,
Individual
so
events. It's
I'm
not
familiar with a
one.
fair, but that's perhaps, a very long amount of time, but it's like one area that's the fair, and they'll have different
And
parts.
it's all
but
over town.
This is all over town, and it's multiple different events. It's almost like different colors, different flavors
That's right.
of Fiesta.
And as Fiesta grew, different groups got involved, from Taste of New Orleans, that's the Zulu guys from the East Side. They're all African Americans who raise money for scholarships, to St. Mary's University, that has the unlikely title of Oyster Bake, where there are actually raw oysters and baked oysters, that also raises money for scholarships. And then LULAC, which is a Latino organization, also decades of experience in raising money for scholarships. So all of these, there are money-making ventures and there are a lot of nonprofit ventures, and all of it under the banner of having lots of fun.
Exactly. And we're going to talk specifically about why both of you are joining me today on In-Depth. John, I know you've written specifically about the first Battle of the Flowers. We're going to get to that here in a moment. But Elaine, you've been described to me kind of like as Miss Fiesta.
That's what I aspire to be, Miss Fiesta, but I think I'm too old for the pageant. So therefore...
You're judged now.
Yeah.
Yeah, backed by popular demand.
I did get to judge one year. But my family has always embraced Fiesta since I was a very little girl. We went to all the parades, and we were a poor family from the West Side, but somehow my family made it possible for us to attend events, to go to the carnival, get on a nice ride, and have a sausage and a stick, and really have a lot of fun. So I always associated it, before I knew the history, to just one big fair that kind of went on all week, and you got 2 or 3 parades that you could go to during the whole week.
We haven't even spoken about the parades. We've been talking about the events.
The River Parade last night, and we're looking forward to the Day Parade a little earlier this year, so it won't be too hot. And then my favorite, which is the Flambeau Parade, which is also sort of has its own little history, because it is the longest and most continuous running illuminated parade in the country. And it's absolutely my favorite because it's cooler, it's usually breezy, and the colors and the lights are so beautiful.
Excellent.
I make it a tailgate party.
And I want to point out, perhaps you may have heard this. What is this noise that we're hearing? Because this was something that I didn't know about that I learned.
Okay, every festival has its own color and sound. So one of the sounds that becomes sort of expected during Fiesta is the clanging of metal together, and these are Fiesta medals, and there are literally thousands and thousands of different Fiesta medals that are issued every year and represent different groups, and they're sold or given away. Sometimes corporations make them for their employees. Sometimes, Budweiser gives them out to every person carrying, a Bud Light cup. And we even have one at the Express News that says, "Show me," instead of the saying, "show me your shoes," which is a calling out that we have at every parade. It says, "Show me your news."
Nice. And also, someone here, I won't use the name, but someone was very excited. They had like a grab bag where you could get medals earlier before everything was really kicking off. And someone got a pop for president, Greg Popovich.
Oh, that was a good
so
one.
So coveted. Everyone took a picture of that.
Yeah. And so like this year, I always handle the Fiesta medals contest, and I invite all organizations to send in one medal, and it will be judged by these experts in Fiesta medals. And we give out bragging rights by selecting first, second, and third place winners in 21 categories, and then best of show. And this year, the best of show winner was Palo Alto College's PACFest medal, which is an accordion that opens up to show the name of the festival.
That's pretty nice, yeah.
Best in show. So, and you can find all those medals, about 500 of them, online on mysanantonio.com.
Oh, well, excellent plug. There we are.
Click through.
It reminds me a bit of, I went to broadcasting school, and I have a lot of friends who, have gone to journalism, and quite a few of them have gone to different Olympic events around the world, and you have the same medals, and it goes back into history, and people are trading. But this seems like it's been brought up to 11. This seems even more than that.
Well, yes, we're a little out of control, especially since we order all our medals from China. So they have to orders have to go a long way, and then they have to come back a long way to make it here. So at the very end of Fiesta, some groups already will order their Fiesta medals for next year.
Sure, yeah.
Because if you make the mistake of ordering your medal in January, the Chinese New Year will get in the way, and factories close down for 25 days during January. So forget that. Then in February, the Chinese also take another day off called Tomb Sweeping Day, where they go to their ancestors' tombs, sort of like our Dia de los Muertos here, and they spend some time with the people that they love that are long gone. So if you've got to get your medal order clink clank around November.
You heard it first here. It's a public service announcement. So I think we've done a very good job, or mostly you, Elaine, have done a very good job of explaining what Fiesta is like nowadays, right? So let's maybe go back in time and talk about how it all started, and specifically how parts of it started. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, John, you've written specifically about the first Battle of the Flowers, emphasis on battle.
Well, the first Battle of the Flowers took place on April 24th, 1891, and it was the work of some high society ladies who were trying to emulate public carnivals they'd seen in Europe and in Mexico, where well-dressed women in finely decorated carriages would parade around and then have kind of a symbolic Battle of the Flowers where they throw bouquets and battles at each other and flowers at each other. And they didn't have a lot of time to plan it. That had been canceled once for rain, but on April 24th, 1871, it was launched to great acclaim and great enthusiasm locally. A local woman, a local art historian named Judith Sobrey, fortunately wrote an excellent treatment of this in her book, San Antonio on Parade, which I was very fortunate to discover this week.
And you spoke with her about that,
yes.
right?
I wrote an earlier story about the Battle of the Flowers and Fiesta, and she called me and she said, "You're missing the best part." Well, that's music to a reporter's ear. So I said, "Tell me more." And that same day, I was up in the North Side getting her book out of the library. And Judith Sobrey wrote this excellent treatment of the first Battle of the Flowers and many thereafter. And she had the good fortune, or perhaps it was just hard work, to come across an article in the San Antonio Light, April 25th, 1891, which gave a blow-by-blow description of the first Battle of the Flowers, which was in fact literally a battle.
Yeah, like I said, emphasis on blow by blow. Yeah, so tell me about that.
I'm going to read a few excerpts from Ms. Sobrey's book, and then something from the San Antonio Light article, and you'll get the picture. It all started according to plan, Judith Sobrey wrote. The weather was fine. Everyone was enthusiastic. There was a military band and 100 carriages. And as she notes, many of the ladies wore dresses to match the color of their vehicle decorations. The parade was gorgeous and a colorful spectacle. Here, delicacy and feminine charm reigned, she wrote. Well, all that kind of ended when the procession reached Alamo Plaza, where the participants in the parade were supposed to divide up and face each other and throw flowers back and forth. But it quickly devolved into basically a brawl because the spectators, 15,000 of them, possibly some who had been imbibing of strong drink, quickly joined the combat, and it quickly went from being a polite tossing of flowers to people fighting with buggy whips and throwing things at each other, fist fights. And I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from the San Antonio Light article. He said, upon arriving at the plaza, police divided the procession into two lines, each half going in opposite directions and facing around the park. The crowd on foot pressed the carriages closely, and the fight began and waged furiously for nearly an hour. The occupants of the carriages had all the ammunition, while those on foot had none. They began picking up the fallen roses from the pavement and even tearing off the trimmings of the carriages, and soon they had the best of it. Heavy punches of laurel soon had their effect, and many ladies lost their tempers and used their carriage whips indiscriminately on the crowd. One lady struck Dr. Fitzgerald, a passive spectator, a severe blow in the face with her whip, but did not see the need to apologize. And on it goes to describe men climbing out of carriages, getting in fist fights. It describes horses panicking and rushing into the crowd, trampling children, dragging drivers. It describes how some small boys thought it would be helpful to start a dogfight in the middle of all this, which further panicked the crowd. And as it goes on with the narrative, which sort of resembles a blow-by-blow of a sports event, it said some of the combatants whose supply of ammunition had exhausted resorted to buggy robes and quirks for aggressive warfare. And at the end of it all, several people were arrested. No one was seriously hurt, as far as we can tell, or killed. But it was clear to everyone that if they were to do this again, they would need far more police and possibly have to be a bit more selective in whom they invited to participate in all this.
It's really interesting. You said it was at Alamo Plaza, correct? It really sounds like the second battle of the Alamo, the way you've described it.
Well, I guess it probably was.
Yeah.
And it's just the amusing thing is of how things can get out of hand. You can't anticipate all the outcomes. And here you just had a pandemonium where what they wanted was beauty, decorum, and grace.
Well, so far this year, nothing like that has happened.
We've managed a fight or two in the past, but never. And of course, there was that year in the 70s when we had a sniper. Remember, John? But usually, everyone's well behaved and cordial. Now, I should tell you though, that Fiesta has a racial past as well. In these stories, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was mention of African Americans who were involved in the brawl that were especially sort of targeted by the story. And we should also say the very beginnings of Fiesta were exclusively white and from the elite. King Antonio, the reigning king of Fiesta, there was not ever a non-white member until last year when they elected their first Latino King Antonio. So there is that as well. But I can tell you, just as a person that's been a lifelong West Sider in San Antonio, is that diversity is another big element of Fiesta, because there's just such a wide array of events that come from every corner of the community, from the LGBT that have their own Fiesta to the East Side and the African American community, the West Side and LULAC, just everything. And then the great diversity among each of the groups too. It's a goal of Fiesta, really.
Certainly, like a lot of things in the United States.
Exactly.
A past
it's a mirror of the United
has gotten
States.
better every year. And as you just mentioned, even just last year, quite a change that had taken place.
And really, what Fiesta is so much about is food. And I know you've had a podcast on food, but
we have two podcasts. We have the Taste Cast, and we have 52 Weeks of Barbecue.
Speak about Fiesta enough and food.
That's and this week when they recorded this week's episode of Tastecast, they spoke specifically about Fiesta, and that was an interesting episode. Check that out at expressnews.com/podcast. There are some differing opinions on waiting in line for food and whether or not
some people just aren't patient.
That was the discussion. Yes, exactly.
I think it's an opportunity for more beer myself, but
that actually came up too. That was the rebuttal. Was that just you drink in line and
just have a beer,
have a good time in the nice weather? Exactly right. So we've covered a lot so far. We do have some more time though. So let's talk a little bit more. We've been discussing everything Fiesta is local, but how has Fiesta embraced localness, if you will, and what has it meant to San Antonio all these years? Because it's as we kind of started off, I'm familiar with state fairs and stuff. It's different. I would never call this a state fair. I've heard it described as a celebration, and perhaps I would add a local celebration.
And a series of events that come under one roof. We had a story earlier this week by our colleague Bruce Selcraig, who delved into the localness of the topic of the festival, of the Fiesta week, and what local Fiesta leaders seem to say is that we could have many years ago, and we still could, bring in huge talent for a festival, make it more than it ever was, but the forces locally want to keep it local. And I think that's been the great success. Mardi Gras is Mardi Gras. It is so New Orleans, even though people from all over the world attend. And, it's not like Austin's great sort of techie festival. I'm forgetting the
South
name.
by Southwest,
South
right?
by Southwest.
I've heard it described as not like South by Southwest because it kept its local roots.
That's right.
Yeah.
And South by Southwest is now a great big festival that Austinites shun.
I have some friends who live in Austin, and that's sometimes the case, yeah.
And that's not true of San Antonio. San Antonio is still puts on a fiesta that people stay in town for. In fact, there are people that specifically take vacation time during Fiesta so they can truly enjoy it. And I was just telling one of my colleagues who's going to head out to Nyosa tonight, a night in Old San Antonio at La Villita, which happens over 4 nights starting Tuesday. And what is so true of their history is that there are now 3-4 generations of Nyosa volunteers that continue to serve there for free for the conservation efforts of the organization that puts it on.
You talked about scholarships before. Nyosa is not necessarily for scholarships, but it's a big fundraiser.
It's for preservation in San Antonio because the San Antonio Conservation Society raises money to be able to restore old places, to help fund the preservation efforts of various homes in town. And so they want millions to come in because we need millions to do that.
And speaking of millions, if memory serves, I think it was like 1.5 million is what they're expected to, or what they raised last year from Nyosa.
Oh yeah, and that's probably on the low end. They've done much higher in other times. And then we have, an easy 300,000 that come out for the parades, and that one is run by the Battle of Flowers Association that does
emphasis more on flowers nowadays rather than the battle, right?
Well,
John?
now it's still medals and flowers in your hair, or in halos, or in your hat.
Exactly. Fiesta is a good time. I've been enjoying it, and I look forward to the events that remain as we're recording this now. We just have a few moments left. Let's continue probably to talk a little bit more about this localness, because talk about the future of Fiesta. So the parallel we just talked about, Mardi Gras, South by Southwest, I think a lot of people would say that that's not the track that people would want Fiesta to go. So how do you look at Fiesta into the future? Just your own opinion, or what people have spoken to you about? What is there a specific concern of maintaining Fiesta?
Well, according to the Fiesta leaders who were in our paper just this week, the answer is no. They're going to keep it local. And what I can tell you is that the Fiesta Commission, which is sort of the umbrella organization over Fiesta events, and Fiesta events that start out and aren't really sanctioned yet by the Fiesta Commission.
I think you mentioned that earlier. Official, unofficial.
Unofficial, right. So any guy can set up a little booth and try to sell turkey legs, and more power to them. It's the entrepreneurial spirit. But a lot of organizations sort of want to be sanctioned by the Fiesta Commission and want to be an official Fiesta event that gets listed on the Fiesta Commission website in the 100. Now, how many pages is that book? I think we have at least a 60-page book.
I have a couple of like pamphlet magazine type books, and I've checked out the website a lot.
And they contain every official Fiesta event. And what I thought was interesting is that the Fiesta Commission makes it requires that your event, say you've got a church festival, that you really want to be listed as a official Fiesta event that gets on the website, gets in the book, and the people that maybe don't belong to your church want to come out and help your church raise money and have a good time. So you need to have 3 consecutive years of being a Fiesta, unofficial Fiesta event.
Oh, that's interesting.
Then you apply to be an official Fiesta event, and then organizations, like I was out on Earth Day on Saturday at Woodlawn Park, and I was the MC, and so we had a visit from 2 Fiesta commissioners who were there just to make sure, hey, you're still holding up your end of the bargain. It's a good event. You're attracting hundreds of people, so we're going to let you keep your Fiesta stamp of approval.
Excellent. I've never heard of something like that where to become official, they almost encourage unofficialness because it's part of the process.
It's part of the process. And so, for example, corneation, that irreverent satire where they're faux queens and, drag queens sort of dressed up as queens. It's a lovely event that happens at the Empire Theater. And it was a very unofficial event. That, some members of city council probably didn't like being made fun of. And now it's sort of, oh, please make fun of me. I'm special enough. I'm important enough to be made into satire. So, and it's a very official event, and they raise tons of money, and they give it to the San Antonio AIDS Foundation as
Excellent,
an LGBT group. So there's all of these different efforts to raise money for important charities.
Yeah, and I guess that would be my final point is that's also something that seems, at least in my experience, and I've lived quite a few different places, the money raising aspect of this seems very different than state fairs and other big festivals and things that I've been a part of. So that's nice that that's been maintained.
So while there's a lot of people out there making, this is Christmas for them.
People are making money. That's true.
Money.
I'm not saying they're not making money.
There are people that will buy a stand to be at a specific place because they know they can rake it in, and it's sort of their Christmas. It's how they provide for themselves for a great part of the year. But still, there's some charity that's making some money. Say you went out to the Market Square this weekend where you went to
that.
Fiesta
There's
de
a
los
lot of
Reyes.
Live music and not a lot of room to walk.
Yeah,
there were a lot of people
Los
there.
Reyes are the former Rey Feos of the LULAC organization that used to reign during Fiesta, and now their task is to continue to raise money for scholarships. So the guy that they sold that booth to is making money selling his tripa tacos, but they got their money up front in thousands of dollars in that booth. So everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy. That should be a nice bumper sticker. Fiesta, everyone's happy.
And the beer trucks keep coming.
I saw beer trucks when I was walking around.
Oh,
That's
they're
right,
at the ready. They're at the ready.
Oh, Fiesta. So final thoughts before we say goodbye, Elaine and John. Anything that you'd like to add before we say goodbye? I think John's got something.
I'm going to take you back to 1985 when I moved to San Antonio with 2 young kids from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is a whole different type of place.
Yeah.
And I remember we got here in April 85. We didn't know anything about Fiesta. We went downtown. We found a place on the curb, and the impression I had back then, coming from decadent South Florida, as I watched the generals and the pretty girls and the marching bands, that everything was like I felt like I'd gone back 20 years in time, and it was exquisitely charming. And perhaps only an outsider for the first time can really grasp the So,
and I can follow that by saying, I'm so proud of San Antonio as a native San Antonian to hear that from a non-native, because you'll hear about the decadence of say a Mardi Gras where there's all sorts of exposed body parts. But in San Antonio,
I didn't see that in the days
San
I've been
Antonio,
here.
we ask queens to show us their shoes because under those long gowns, they're wearing cowboy boots or sneakers that are decked out and bejeweled. And I think that is indeed charming. And it says so much about San Antonio. And Viva Fiesta.
There we are. That's right. Viva Fiesta. Well, Viva John MacCormack and Elaine Ayala. Thank you both for joining me. It's been fun talking about
Thanks
Fiesta.
for having us.
And a big thank you to San Antonio Express News reporters John MacCormack and Elaine Ayala for joining me for today's episode of In Depth, an interview program from expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, have a great Fiesta. I'm Chance Dorland.